Trauma. That's the first word that comes to mind when I think of Hereditary. This psychological horror film isn't just about ghosts and demons. It's about generational trauma, grief, and the terrifying idea that fate might be inescapable. The movie blends psychological horror with the occult, weaving in supernatural elements that can be interpreted in different ways. On one hand, the supernatural can be a metaphor, representing forces beyond human control, like trauma itself. But to truly understand Hereditary, we have to take the supernatural at face value. The film presents a world where demons are real, and one in particular, Paimon, lurks behind every moment of suffering. Paimon is a king of hell, a demon found in various occult traditions, most notably the Lesser Key of Solomon. He is said to rule over the Legion of Spirits, offering knowledge, power, and secrets at a price. He's often depicted riding a camel, accompanied by followers who offer him gifts and sacrifices. In Hereditary, Paimon is the true force behind the Grahams family's suffering. The cult in the film is devoted to summoning him and ensuring he takes a male host, as he prefers to inhabit male bodies. Annie's mother, Ellen, was part of this cult, orchestrating her own family's torment to bring Paimon into Peter's body. But here's the twist. Paimon has been in the film from the very beginning, because Paimon is Charlie, or rather, he was. One of the biggest strengths of this movie is how it shifts perspectives with the Graham family, reinforcing the themes of powerlessness, manipulation, and fate. Instead of following a single protagonist, the camera immerses us in each character's suffering. This is how the film makes the traumatic scenes feel so shocking. Hereditary opens with a slow pan into one of Annie's miniature houses, immediately setting the tone. These tiny models symbolize how the characters are nothing more than puppets, manipulated by forces beyond their control. Even before the plot unfolds, the film tells us outright, this family has no agency. They are merely dolls in someone's game. We meet the Graham family in a moment of grief, preparing for Ellen's funeral. Most of them seem normal, except for Charlie. She's not just the stereotypical creepy horror movie kid. She's different, disconnected, off. Some could assume that she's tapped into the spirit realm. At the funeral, Annie delivers a eulogy that hints at her complicated, distant relationship with her mother. The room is filled with unfamiliar faces, making it clear that Ellen had a secret life, a life tied to something sinister. Throughout the funeral, subtle details hint at the cult's presence. Ellen's necklace, the strange woman brushing oil on her lips, and Charlie noticing something no one else does. Charlie was Ellen's favorite, and the only one visibly upset about her death. Why? Because Charlie wasn't just a little girl. She was a temporary vessel for Paimon. Ellen created a bond between the two when she was an infant. As we learn later, Ellen and the cult have been planning this ritual for decades. The events in Hereditary unfold over several months. Though the timeline is intentionally vague, time jumps forward in almost a dreamlike fashion, highlighting only the key moments in Paimon's grand design. One of the film's earliest foreshadowing moments happens in Peter's classroom. His teacher leads a discussion about Hercules, a hero who tries to escape fate but ultimately can't, mirroring Peter's arc throughout the film. Meanwhile, Charlie decapitates a pigeon, a disturbing act, but more importantly, foreshadowing. Decapitation is a reoccurring motive in Hereditary, symbolizing both ritual sacrifice and the stripping away of identity. Later that night, Steve receives a call from the cemetery. The conversation is vague, but watching it back, it's clear this call is about Ellen's grave being desecrated. He doesn't tell Annie. This is important for later. At the grief support group, Annie reveals her family's dark past. She recounts how her father starved himself, her brother had schizophrenia and died by suicide, believing their mother was putting people inside him. In hindsight, this is chilling confirmation that Ellen has been trying to summon Paimon for years. Back at home, Charlie sees a strange glowing light, which is Paimon's presence made visible. It lures her outside, guiding her like a puppet on strings, to see Ellen summoning demons. Then comes the infamous party scene. Charlie, forced to go with Peter, accidentally eats nuts, triggering her allergy. In a frantic rush to the hospital, Peter speeds down the road as Charlie gasps for air. In a desperate move, she sticks her head out the window and is instantly decapitated by the telephone pole. Peter sits in silent shock, unable to process what just happened. He dissociates, driving home and crawling into bed, leaving Annie to discover her daughter's headless corpse the next morning. Charlie's death wasn't an accident. It was a ritual sacrifice, confirmed by the cult symbol on the telephone pole. The cult's plan is now in motion. The Graham family falls apart after Charlie's death. Annie isolates herself, consumed by grief and guilt. She begins creating disturbing dioramas, recreating the accident in horrifying detail. The family turns against each other, especially Annie and Peter. Then Annie meets Joanne. At first, Joanne seems like a kind woman trying to help Annie through her grief. But we know better. Joanne is a cult member, manipulating Annie into performing a seance, a ritual disguised as an innocent attempt to contact Charlie. Annie brings the seance home, convincing Peter and Steve to join. What they don't realize is that the seance is a trap. When they open the door to Charlie, they're really welcoming Paimon into their lives. Annie gets possessed, and Peter gets visibly upset by it. While Steve stops Annie from the possession, the seance scene expands the characters even further. Annie, in this insufferable grief, is trying to contact Charlie, trying to prove to her family that Charlie is still with them. Peter, who is still in shock about the accident, gets another shock into the spiritual realm. Steve seems to be suspicious of Annie. He tries to support her, but at the same time, he is becoming wary of her. From here, things spiral. Peter is haunted by apparitions, clicking noises, and nightmarish visions. The glowing light follows him now, Paimon's true target. Annie, finally realizing Joanne's connection to her mother, digs into Ellen's belongings. She finds books on demonology and learns who Paimon is. More importantly, she learns what he wants: Peter. In a horrifying moment, Annie discovers Ellen's decapitated corpse in the attic, surrounded by the cult symbols. The discovery of Ellen's body shows just how much control the cult had from the very beginning, leaving Annie to wonder, who the fuck is bringing her dead mother into the attic? Then comes Peter's classroom scene, a test of strength. Paimon makes his move, violently possessing Peter in broad daylight, slamming his head into his desk, contorting his body in ways that shouldn't be possible. Peter was able to fight Paimon off, or was it just a design in the grand plan? After Peter and Steve return from the hospital, Annie, now desperate, finally communicates with Steve. She shows him Ellen's body in the attic. This is the part where Steve accuses Annie of digging up Ellen. Annie, furious with the accusations, tries to tell Steve in full detail what is happening. Steve, left with more confusion, is unsure what to do. Annie tries to convince him to destroy Charlie's book, believing it's the source of the hauntings. But when she throws it in the fire, Steve bursts into flames, turning into straight barbecue. And just like that, Annie is gone. Watching her husband being burnt to a crisp sent her over the edge. So Paimon is able to take full control over her body. What follows is one of the most terrifying endings in horror history. Peter wakes up to find his father's charred corpse. His mother, now fully possessed, lurks in the shadows, crawling along the walls like an insect. She chases Peter to the attic. He barricades himself inside, only to witness his mother sawing off her head with a piano wire. With nowhere left to run, Peter does the only thing he can. He jumps out the window. His lifeless body lays on the ground. The glowing light drifts into him. Peter slowly stands up, his posture different. His expression is vacant. Peter no longer owns his body. Paimon does. He climbs into the treehouse where the cult awaits. They kneel before him, placing a crown on his head. Joanne speaks. "It's alright now, Charlie. You are Paimon." The film ends in eerie, calm silence. The cult has won. The Graham family? They were just pawns. Hereditary begs the question, are we in control of our own fate?